A lot of talk about Game 7. We opened up the show with it. We'll close the show with it. But there's also a lot of interest, a ton of interest in all of the NFL games that were going on yesterday. And in particular, the most interesting NFL game that was going on yesterday was, I think, and we talked about this a lot coming into Sunday. By the way, hate to brag or draw attention to myself, but the Outkick 6-pack of picks went 4-0 so far. We've got both of the overs in tonight's, and even this afternoon, depending on what time zone you're in, double Monday Night Football header tonight. So we've got both of the overs in this game. So I would encourage you guys to check that out and make sure that you're on top of both of those games. And we've just been on such an unbelievable roll right now with our gambling picks. We went 4-0. But I told you, I spent a ton of time on it, that the Bucs, this was a circle the wagons game. And for those of you out there, you're like, what does circle the wagons mean? It's like an old pioneer thing out west when you're about to get raided and you know you're about to have to fight a battle. You pull all the wagons together, you circle them together, and you get set to fight and to battle with everybody. And I thought that the Bucs were so bad in that loss that they had against the Bears that I absolutely loved the Bucs going up against the undefeated Green Bay Packers. And most people disagreed with me on this. After I talked about it, we had so many of you out there just blowing up my mentions. Because ultimately, over 90% of gamblers were on the Packers to get it done against the Bucs. But I said, no, Brady wasn't good. Everybody was making fun of him for holding up four fingers for the way that game ended against the Bears. And I'm here to tell you he's going to be a lot better next, all right? Even against a great competition. And so this was a circle the wagons game, and I got to give him credit. Dub, you were, even though there was a lot of haters out there, when we said the Bucs are going to win this game, and I said, don't even worry about the points. I think Green Bay was like a point favorite. I said, just take the Bucs on the money line. You were a big backer of this pick, even though there's a lot of hate out in the social media streets over us backing the Bucs.
You can't read all that crap. Biggest agreement of the year, and look what happened. Big time blowout.
Big time blowout. Can't get caught up in the noise. Can't allow that to be a major determining factor for you. But so much noise out there, and I got to tell you, Aaron Rodgers and the and really the Packers in general, they looked absolutely atrocious. But the Bucs just took control of them. It was never remotely close. It was a beatdown of epic proportions. I'm not sure how many times we're going to get to watch Brady and the Bucs play against Aaron Rodgers and the Packers again. We haven't gotten to see him, obviously, a ton because of the NFC-AFC overlap over most of that time. But now that they're both in the NFC, this is so much fun to watch. And I just thought it was absolutely extraordinary to get to watch that game. And the Bucs were phenomenal. So to me, that was one of the biggest takeaways in general from how good and how impressive the Bucs looked in getting that done. All right? So that was a huge win. Other big moments that I thought stood out from everything going on in the NFL, I got to tell you, how good did the Steelers look in just dominating the Browns? I mean, there was a lot of talk coming in. Oh, you know what? The Browns are for real. They're going to be able to make a move. They've won 4 in a row. Baker Mayfield, new Baker Mayfield, Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, all the success out there. And the Steelers just came in and took control of this game early, and it was never really a contest. And now the Steelers are going to be going on the road against my Titans. But remember, Steelers are up 24-0. They got a pick six in the first quarter. They're just rolling, and this was never, ever a game at all. And I think Browns fans are staring in the mirror right now, and they're like, oh, maybe we should be a little bit nervous here. The other big takeaway, I thought, two more big takeaways in the NFL in particular. I thought that the Titans win over the Texans. Now, I'm a little bit biased because I was there. I was there with my two oldest sons. I was there with my nephew. And the Titans were left for dead in this game. They were up 21-7. They were cruising. They were attempting a field goal midway through the third quarter. Make that field goal. They're up 2 touchdowns. Suddenly the wheels come off the defense. And I don't know how many of you got to watch the final drive, but touchdown with 4 seconds left to A.J. Brown, and then kick the extra point. And you saw at overtime, Deshaun Watson came out and he called tails, and then heads was the win. And as soon as they said heads, you saw Deshaun Watson react, and he was like, well, that's ball game, because Derrick Henry and the Titans offense was almost unstoppable. They posted over 600 yards of offense, which has almost never been seen in the NFL. 600 yards of offense in an NFL game is unheard of. In fact, the Titans were the first team in NFL history with a 350-plus yard passer. Ryan Tannehill went for 364, and a 200-plus yard runner in the same game. It's literally never happened before in the history of the NFL that you could find yourself in that situation where there was that much level of dominance, not just for a team to be successful in the passing game, 350 yards passing, big deal, but also to go over 200 rushing. This Titan offense is for real. And so that is pretty crazy. And by the way, there was a lot of talk about, as good as Derrick Henry is, that 94-yard run. If you didn't see it, go watch the highlights. Not only is he big, physically tough, and strong, but his ability to just hit next gears on his running is just off the charts. I think they said he was nearly 21 miles an hour on that run when he broke into the open field and no one could catch him. But Ryan Tannehill, there's a lot of question about whether it was the right decision to give big money to Ryan Tannehill, nearly $100 million from the Titans, and his 16-game pace right now. He's through 5 games, so we're still relatively early. But his 16-game pace, he's on pace to throw for over 4,300 yards, 42 touchdowns, and 6 INTs. And we talked about this last week, how basically Ryan Tannehill and Patrick Mahomes have almost the exact same statistics over the past 15 games, and we'll see how Tannehill does in this game. But this was pretty wild to have that situation, something that has truly never been done before in the history of the NFL, and it was an amazing game for the Titans. Basically ended the Houston Texans season sitting at 1-5. Titans get to 5-0, and we certainly are now set up for what I think you have to say is the biggest game of Week 7. The Titans going up against the Steelers, 2 undefeated teams. There are only 3 undefeated teams left. The Seahawks are the only NFC team that's still undefeated. And then we've got 2 teams that are undefeated in the AFC. Obviously, there'll only be 1 undefeated team left in the AFC at the end of that game. The other big story that I think stood out, what is going on with the New England Patriots? They were bad. They were really bad. Now, if you're a Denver Bronco fan, congratulations. You got back Drew Lock. He went on the road. He got the win. But this was a game that the New England Patriots never, ever lose during their dynasty. And I think it's fair to say that this dynasty run is officially over. Because New England, this is a crazy stat for you, the last time New England was below 500. I saw this and I was like, this is an unbelievable stat. The Patriots are below 500 through 5 games for the first time. They're 2-3 for the first time since 2001, when Tom Brady led the team to the first of its 6 Super Bowl titles. New England has now snapped a streak of 18 consecutive seasons above 500 through 5 games, which was the longest streak in NFL history. And I'm not sure anybody will ever be this good ever again. But it is pretty wild to even think about how dominant for how long the New England Patriots have been. And it wasn't just that they played poorly. It was that Cam Newton, coming off of the COVID list and having been out for a substantial period of time, that all of a sudden he is just come back down to earth. And as good as the Patriots looked, remember when Cam Newton got stopped in that incredible game we watched against the Seahawks on the final play of the game where they tried to sneak it in with him, suddenly he's able to run, but his passing is not coming along and progressing at the same level. And so he was just okay. I mean, just okay in general when you think about that situation. And so that game stood out to me in a pretty big way. And then the Eagles almost came back. The other game that stands out to me is the Eagles almost found a way to come back against the Ravens, but the door is now wide open for Monday Night Football for Andy Dalton and the Cowboys if they can beat the Cardinals to just take complete control of the woeful NFC East, given the fact that everybody just continues to lose left and right in that division. And so the Ravens, I think even if you're a Ravens fan, you would acknowledge that so far this year, the mojo, even though, look, I understand the Ravens are 5-1, but the mojo just doesn't feel the same with this Ravens team as it has felt in the past. Their offense is good, but not great. And even though they're 5-1, I think that beatdown that they took from the Chiefs is kind of lingering in the back of their minds. And so I don't feel like they have the same sort of vibrancy that they had last year. The other game, and I know there are people out there who are like, oh my God, talk about us more. The Bears are 5-1. Got to mention that the Bears are 5-1. And I'm not convinced that the Bears are very good. I've been saying it for a while. They got outgained again. They didn't particularly run the football very well, but they found a way to win, and they are now sitting at 5-1, and they are right now, I believe, Dub, you can confirm this, I believe they are in first place in the NFC North if the season were to end right now, because the Packers are 4-1. So the Bears at the week 6 complete, the Bears are sitting at 5-1, and they're in a pretty strong spot going forward as everybody starts to rotate in their bye weeks and everything else there. So those were the big storylines to me from the week that was in the NFL. Also want to hit you with a couple of decent storylines from college football here as I run through everything that stood out to me in a big way about college football. It's that and you heard us talking about this with Joel Klatt earlier, Bama is still Bama. Absolutely dominant performance by Alabama in the second half, 21-0. They just pulled away from Georgia, and I felt like Stetson Bennett did everything he could to keep that game close, but eventually things just kind of went awry in that way for Georgia. And if you're a Georgia fan, it's still going to come down to the cocktail party. But I think if you watch that game, you said, wait a minute, how are we going to cover Devontae Smith, and how are we going to cover Jalen Waddle? Alabama just seems to me to have more playmakers, and Mac Jones just feels like a much more substantially talented quarterback than Stetson Bennett. That's not insulting Stetson Bennett, who I think has allowed Georgia to have the success that they have. And in the first half, his receivers didn't help him a lot with making catches, and he got a couple of bad bounces in terms of interceptions. But all in all, it is just it's just challenging to me to think about Georgia having much of a chance to beat Alabama in the SEC championship game. But if you're a Georgia fan, I think you go back to the drawing board. You say, okay, we lost this game. What did we learn from it? How can we get better? And ultimately, our season is going to be defined by whether or not we can win the cocktail party against Florida. If we win that one, we're probably going to be 9-1, and we're probably going to be back in the mix to be able to potentially play ourselves into a championship. I feel like Alabama's not going to lose to anybody else on their schedule. I think if you look at the Crimson Tide, the rest of their schedule, it's a whole lot of teams that they are a lot better than. I think Alabama is going to be 10-0, and I think they are going to be in pretty outstanding shape going forward. I feel like Alabama is going to be a playoff team. I also feel like Clemson, who hung 73 on poor Georgia Tech. I don't know what Georgia Tech said about Clemson's mom, but it must have been bad because Clemson is going to be in the playoff too. And Alabama's final 6, by the way, you can argue, I think pretty solidly, that already we have seen Alabama play the two toughest teams on their schedule, Texas A&M and Georgia. and the final 6 is Tennessee, Mississippi State, at LSU, Kentucky, Auburn, and Arkansas. I'm not saying that you can't lose. Certainly anything can happen in the world of college football, particularly in a COVID year, but I don't feel like Alabama is going to lose to any of those games. And if that's true, then they're going to get into the SEC title game, and all they're going to have to do is get there at 10-0, and even if they lost to Georgia, they'd be into the playoff. So that is the big takeaway from Alabama. That's a big takeaway from Clemson. The other thing is, on this show, I would say the 2 biggest college football fans are Dub and myself. And Dub, I think you're with me here in that we have really, really difficult quarterbacks to watch. And in particular point of fact, I mean, I don't even know how I can watch Jarrett Garantano for Tennessee. Congratulations to Kentucky for just taking it to Tennessee. But, Dub, your Auburn Tigers with Bo Nix, they lost on the road against South Carolina. Our teams are going to play Tennessee and Auburn, and I feel like both teams should just lie and claim that they have COVID so we don't have to watch both of these quarterbacks play against each other.
That's fine with me. I mean, I may not – well, first of all, South Carolina getting points at home this week against Auburn was maybe the easiest bet I'll win all season. I'll just say that. I'm not afraid to fade my own team.
Yeah.
Bo Nix, the last play of the game, it's 4th and goal or 4th and 6, whatever it is. He runs around in circles, and then he doesn't even throw the ball, and the clock hits 0.
Yeah,
the lack
not a good
of
sign on 4th down when your starting quarterback does not realize that he has to get a touchdown and can't. I mean, worst case scenario, right? You just throw it in the end zone and hope it gets knocked around. Maybe you get a pass interference call. Like, the one thing that you cannot do is allow that clock to expire without at least giving your team a chance to win.
Absolutely. It's tough to watch, and I know you're in a very similar boat to me. It's a sad time for myself and yourself right now in terms of our beloved teams.
I just got to say, I mean, if you throw 2 pick sixes, I mean, you know how hard it is to throw a pick six, right? One of them was a linebacker returning the ball 85 yards. Like, that's almost impossible to do. It wasn't even a defensive back. Double pick sixes in the game, double pick sixes and a half is virtually unheard of. And so that put Tennessee in a 14-point hole. And I talked to Joel Klatt a little bit earlier about that. I do think with only conference play going on, there are a lot less opportunities for bad play to get ignored, right? And what I mean by that is, it's just you got to be up in the same way that you do with the NFL. For instance, the Packers got dominated yesterday. I don't think anybody thinks that means the Packers are not bad. Sometimes it's just not your Sunday. I feel like there's a lot more tough games being played since it's all conference, and everybody kind of knows you better in conference than they do when you're out of conference. And so I think those results are all kind of factoring in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, no one is going to claim that the Green Bay Packers are a bad football team. We saw the Rams struggle mightily against San Francisco as well. So
yeah,
these guys are just college kids, and with this schedule, it's way, way more challenging than a normal year. So I couldn't agree more.